Hello everyone, my name is Minuk Kim, and I believe that masculinity does not have to be toxic. Now before I explain what I mean by that a little bit more, I want to introduce myself a little bit. I've been studying at the University of Washington for the past 4 years in the Integrated Social Sciences Department with an emphasis on sociology and anthropology. And today I want to talk about something that I believe is important to not only in the social science world, but to all communities, and specifically in immigrant communities, which I can proudly say I am a part of. I immigrated to the United States in 2012 alongside my two brothers, Minhyuk and Minseong, and my parents. I was 9 at the time. We first moved to the Quad Cities in Iowa when we first immigrated, and eventually moved to the greater Seattle area where I lived for the next 12 years. I'm currently now living back and forth between Shoreline, Washington and Bettendorf, Iowa. When we first immigrated, my dad was able to get a job as the owner of a pawn shop, and my mom was able to eventually find a job as a social worker. Even with both of them being employed, the cost of living in a brand new country and not speaking the language was high. But through constant hard work, sacrifices, and swallowed pride, my parents, my entire family, were able to make it work. Nowadays, my parents are living a much more relaxing life, having moved back to South Korea. My mom is working as a civilian contractor for the Department of Defense at Camp Humphreys in Pyeongtaek. And my dad runs a business out of our family home in Jeju, or Jeju Island. My older brother is commissioned as a nuclear engineer in the United States Navy after having graduated from Boston College with a degree in mathematics. And my younger brother is currently studying economics at Pomona College. During my time as an integrated social science major at the University of Washington, I got to explore, research, and eventually create my own research portfolio using the research that I got to be a part of. This major allowed me to choose what I wanted to research, and I chose to focus on sociology and anthropology. This meant that I studied people, what they do, why they do what they do, and furthermore, how we can understand each other better. My research was centered around one central concept: breaking down social ideas that felt concrete and real, and asking questions to better utilize these concepts. This meant identifying and researching things that are a part of most, if not all of our lives, whether you have studied social sciences or not, but might not have thought too much about, as they have been a part of our life since the day that we were born. One of these ideas is gender/masculinity. However, before we get too far into gender, I would like to first go over the difference between sex and gender. This might feel like a silly thing to talk about for some of us out there, but when we are trying to understand these ideas as best we can in order to use them to make our lives better and improve our community as a whole, I believe it is important to clearly define these ideas. One of the main things sex is defined by is the chromosomes in our DNA. When our DNA is created, we can have either XX chromosomes or XY chromosomes. When our DNA has two X chromosomes, the person is what we typically call female, typified by having female reproductive organs, typically such as a uterus, vagina, amongst other things. When a person has one X chromosome and one Y chromosome, the person is what we typically call a male, usually having male reproductive organs, such as sperm-producing testicles, penis, amongst other things. And I want to clarify, there are undoubtedly exceptions to this binary rule, such as intersex individuals. However, for the sake of today's discussion, I will just be talking about male and female when we're talking about biological sex. Sex is a biological concept that is typically decided by our chromosomes, either XX or XY, and is typified by having either male or female reproductive organs, and it divides a large proportion of us into a binary, male or female. Gender talks about something a little bit different. For example, when I say I met someone wearing a pretty dress, high heels, with long silky hair, who do you think of? Do you immediately think of either a man or a woman? Or if I said I just heard about a group of gang members who got arrested for breaking into a 7-Eleven with guns, wearing face masks, who do you think of? Do you immediately think of a man or woman in your head? All of the descriptors that I mentioned earlier have absolutely nothing to do with our biological sex, whether you have XX chromosomes or XY chromosomes, or whether you have a penis or a vagina. But I bet for each example, people might have thought of either a man or a woman. This is what gender refers to. It's a social idea that is deeply connected to expectations and culture. It divides us into two categories, woman and man, very similarly to biological sex, but different. And when we talk about masculinity, it has everything to do with the idea of gender and being a man. Sociological researcher Susan Wortman defines masculinity by saying that masculinity is a term generally used to denote a set of characteristics, actions, attitudes, expectations, and ways of being that a particular society maintains for men. These characteristics, attitudes, etc., are often rooted in one of two ways that cultures and societies expect men to be. Number one, different from women/femininity and maintaining power/tradition. This might seem like pointing out the obvious, as I basically just said that being masculine is about A, being different than women, and B, maintaining power/tradition. However, when we break this idea down even further, we can start to see the reason as to why viewing masculinity this way can be dangerous and inherently toxic. For example, researcher Nicholas Townsend cites 4 main things that constitute a package deal of successful manhood in the US. Number 1, heterosexual marriage. Number 2, fatherhood. Number 3, employment. And number 4, home ownership. Now, some of us, if not all of us, might think that those are all positive things. And for a lot of us, it is. However, going back to what I said earlier, masculinity is strongly tied to being the opposite of femininity, or what it means to be a woman. What this means is that when we view things such as home ownership or employment as fundamental pillars of being masculine, that immediately make those things anti-feminine, or the way women are supposed to be. This is why when we come across some traditionally masculine men with quote-unquote traditional beliefs, they sometimes can think that women either should not have a job or own homes.